Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. Today I'm creating a see-through shaker tag, so let's get started. I'm taking the Labels and Tags 2 die set. This is the same set that I used in my last video, and I apologise that I'm using it 2 videos running, but actually it's such a cool set because you can use it in lots of different ways. So you can do it in different orientations, and then you've got the different holes that you can use for the different sides as well. So it is a really cool set, and I really love the shape of it, and I thought that this would work really nicely for a shaker tag. So I've got the die and I faced it down onto my craft mat. I'm then taking the Halftone Circles Nesting die set, and I'm taking one of the circles and I'm placing that inside of the tag shape. Technically it's not a tag at this point, it is just a shape, but you know what I mean. I'm then holding those down with some low tack tape purely so that they don't move, and then going to take some satin masking tape and I'm going to place this over the 2 dies. This is going to keep them in place so that I can cut this multiple times. I'm just cutting it twice, but if I needed to cut it more times, I could. I was worried that if I didn't stick them together properly, that I may move the circle inside, and I want there to be a front piece and a back piece because I'm going to create a completely see-through shaker tag today. So I can just peel that off of my craft mat, and then I'm just going to remove those little bits of that tape that I don't really need. I'm going to keep those so that I can use them to die cut it. And then I'm just going to bring in my scissors here and just cut off the excess tape. I wasn't sure at that point how much I needed. I did add a little bit extra than I needed, but that's absolutely fine. Again, you can reuse this tape multiple times. So just cutting off of that excess of the tape, and then I'm going to bring in my anti-static powder tool and I'm just dabbing some powder onto this tape. I'm not going to use this tape to actually die cut with because I want it to not be sticky, so that when I lift it up I'm not accidentally going to misplace any of those dies. So just removing that excess powder with a brush, and then now I've got those 2 dies secured together. I can then cut that from a panel of Nina £110 Classic Crest Solar White cardstock, just using that low tack tape there to hold that in place. I can run that through my die cutting machine, and then I can pop out the tag at the other side. So that's my frame piece, my first one, and then I can easily just remove that set of dies there that I've stuck together, and then I can place that down onto another piece of cardstock so that I can cut the other frame. Unfortunately I couldn't fit 2 in one panel of cardstock, but I can reuse that excess cardstock for something else. So I've got my 2 pieces here that I'm going to add back to back, but I do want to add that hole in the top so that I can create a tag. So I'm taking the whole piece here, and that just fits on the top of the tag really nicely. There's a little kind of groove there so that you can pop that against the side of the die cut, and then I can run that through my die cutting machine to die cut that hole. And I'm just going to do the same thing for the other side of the tag as well. I'm not keen on using liquid glue with acetate, so I'm taking some glue tape here and I'm just running that around the outside of the circle, and that's going to hold the acetate down, which I add on top. You could definitely use double-sided tape or something like that, but glue tape seems to work quite nicely. Just making sure that there's no excess glue on the inside of that circle, and then I've got a piece of acetate here that I've cut down that I'm going to add onto the back. You could use packaging or something like that if you didn't have acetate. And I'm just going to do the exact same thing for the other side as well. So I want this tag to be completely see-through. You didn't necessarily have to do this with the shaker tags. You can definitely just do them one-sided, but I quite like having it completely see-through. So just adding that onto the other side of the tag. And so now I've got my 2 pieces together, And I want to obviously add something onto the front of this tag. So I'm taking the Crafted Flower Carolina Allspice layering die set, and I've used this in a video before and I made excess, so I really don't want to waste these. I wanted to show you here that if I add kind of like create any extra die cuts, especially die cuts, but sometimes I do stamping as well, I like to keep hold of them and eventually I hope to actually use them. So sometimes I create extra if I'm not sure what colour combination I want to use. Sometimes I maybe create 2 flowers but I only end up using 1. And so I really wanted to actually use some up because I put them away and then I never end up actually using them. So I apologise that I'm not showing on camera how I've layered this together, but I will link to the video that I created, and I've used the exact same cardstock. I used the Cherry Blossom and Rose Petal gradient cardstock for the flower, and then I used the Green Meadows gradient cardstock for the leaves. And in that video that I linked to, it shows me layering up that flower and the leaves. So I'm just adding some more glue tape onto the back of the leaves to start with. I want to make sure that I don't add too much adhesive so that it's not going to show on the back of the die cuts, either through the window or on the back of the die cuts, because they are overhanging the shape of the tag. I did want to make sure that you can still see quite a lot of the shaker portion like through the window, but I knew that I was going to obviously cover quite a bit of it up, so that's why the flower is kind of overhanging the shape of the tag quite a bit as well. So just making sure here that there's no adhesive showing on either side. And then I can just figuring out exactly where I want that flower to be. The great thing with that glue tape is you've got a little bit of time to be able to maneuver something if you need to. And then I can add some more glue tape onto the back of the flower here. And then I can just pop that down in place. And I think it looks really nice, just sort of in that bottom corner there. And I did get a little bit of adhesive showing. Again, the great thing with that glue tape is that you can remove it with your finger, as long as you're pretty quick to remove it. I'm then taking some Instant Dimension foam tape and I'm just cutting that down to a smaller size. I'm removing the backing off of that foam tape, and that's going to make it a little bit more pliable so that I can run it around the outside of that circle. So I'm just running it around the outside there of that circle. I want to make sure that there's no gaps in this foam tape so that none of the shaker bits that I add inside are going to fall out. I unfortunately didn't cut a long enough piece, so I'm just cutting another piece there to pop on the other side. And then I want to make sure that these 2 tags are really nice and adhered together well and stable. So I'm just adding some more foam tape around the perimeter of that circle, or the rest of the tag I should say. I'm then taking my anti-static powder tool and I'm using that to add some of that onto the sides of the foam tape. That's just going to hopefully make sure that not too much of the shaker bits that I add inside will stick to that side of that foam tape. I can remove any excess backing off of that foam tape. I find it easier to do that before I add the shaker bits inside, and then so they kind of don't sort of move around as I'm removing that backing of that foam tape. I've added my shaker bits in, and this is kind of like a little bit like iridescent confetti. So there are some circle pieces and then also some little stars as well. I'm just using a Swiffer cloth to remove any sort of excess dust or anything like that on that acetate piece. I do find that acetate, like little bits tend to gravitate towards acetate for some reason, and I don't want to get anything sort of stuck inside. And then I'm just going to line up the 2 tags as best as possible, and then once I'm happy that they're lined up, I can press that down, just making sure that they're lined up from the front and the back. I've then cut the whole reinforcer piece from some black cardstock, and I can pop that at the top, and I think that that just finishes that off quite nicely. I'm then stamping a sentiment, so I've added some black cardstock into the stamp wheel, holding that with the sticky mat. And then I'm going to stamp a sentiment that reads "Just for You" from the Flower Vine stamp set. This is one of my favourites because the sentiments are absolutely tiny, so they do work quite nicely if you don't really want to have the sentiment sort of be the focus, and I haven't got a huge amount of space on my tag. So I'm prepping the cardstock with an anti-static powder tool, removing any excess powder, and then I can ink up the stamp using embossing ink. Embossing ink is a clear sticky ink so that when I add the embossing powder on top, it's going to stick to it. So just inking that up really lightly because it's such a tiny little sentiment. I can flip over that top plate there, press that down, and then I've stamped that down onto the cardstock. I can apply some pure white crisp embossing powder. I like to apply the powder a couple of times, tap off the excess, and then I can heat set that until it's completely melted. And I like to heat set from the front and the back to make sure that I don't overheat that powder. I've cut that into a strip and I'm adding some more instant dimension foam tape onto the back of that, and then I can pop that down onto the tag, just trying to make sure that that sentiment is as straight as possible, and then I can press that down. And then I've added some twine through the top of the tag and tied that in a bow. And that is the shaker tag finished for today. I really love that it's a shaker tag, but I also love that it's see-through. I think that's just something a little bit different. Obviously there's no place to write a personal message or anything like that, but I think this would be really nice to add onto a gift, or also it could be like hung up just as like a little ornament, just something nice to send to a friend. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.